Welcome to Busted Speakers. I'm Kush,
And I'm Alex.
and we're here with Ed, also known as Placid Burrito.
Hello. Just
Uh,
keeping it simple this week.
So today we're going to be reviewing Humanz by Gorillaz. And I know Ed has probably the most emotional attachment to Gorillaz from any of us here.
Yeah, as evidenced from our discussion video a few weeks ago. Yeah.
And I've always liked Gorillaz. I think the first 3 or so albums were like just some of the best music they've put out. So I was excited for this album, and I'm very disappointed right now. I'm so upset right now.
Oh,
Wow.
okay.
Yeah,
That's interesting to hear.
I don't think this is a bad album by any stretch of the imagination. But, and it is quite a big but, I'd be lying if I said I'm not quite disappointed by the band's efforts this time around, by Damon Albarn's efforts this time around. And it feels like for every good thing that this album does, there's something that holds it back. And for every good song, there's a song that has so much potential to be good, but just doesn't quite deliver. And
Yeah.
I would go further than you. I would say there are some outright bad songs on here.
We should get to
But-
those first, because that'd be interesting to hear. But
Yeah.
just to say, the weird thing is, I've loved Gorillaz for 5 years, but I just don't have the same emotional attachment Ed does. Like, when I heard there was a new Gorillaz album coming out, it didn't dawn on me until about the week before I got the CD that I was really going to be listening. Like, even hearing, well, I guess the singles should have like made it quite clear to me. But just having more Gorillaz product, and that doesn't even mean just music, but films, art stills,
artwork, yeah.
speculation, interviews, whatever. Just more buzz around Gorillaz was a good thing for me. I cannot say I'm that disappointed at all, really. I mean, yes, my expectations were quite high, considering on Plastic Beach might be my favourite by them. Sure, Demon Days is probably both of yours. I don't want to... Is it, Ed?
Everyone loves Demon Days.
I love Demon Days. Demon Days is my favourite, but Plastic Beach is also fantastic.
Yes, this isn't on their level, or the debuts.
No way.
But
no, you're wrong, Alex.
No, Alex, I think you're absolutely right. I don't think Humanz is on the same level as Plastic Beach, even. I mean, I know a lot of people who didn't really care for Plastic Beach. I liked it a lot more than a lot of people seem to. But this sort of lukewarm reaction Humanz has been getting, I can't say I'm not a part of that. And it's really disappointing to say. Even though I think this is a pretty good album, it's just lacking something, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But Kush, I'm curious, like, what are the tracks that you thought were outright bad on this record?
Okay, listening to it, I hated the song Saturn's Bars.
Oh,
All right, you're wrong.
you're wrong.
I'm wrong. That song was awful. The autotune was terrible on that song. And the instrumentation was fine. I just couldn't get behind the chorus auto-tune parts. That was just awful.
Oh, Alex, you were saying I've been into Gorillaz a lot longer than you. Do you want to know how long I've been into Gorillaz?
Like 12 years or something.
All my life!
Oh, I didn't see that coming somehow.
No, I like Saturn's Bars quite a lot. It's a
couldn't
very
get behind
bizarre choice for first single, I must admit. This is the only at the time of recording, this is the only single that has a proper music video. So I consider it the first
Hallelujah
single.
Money as well, sort of.
Oh, yeah. Hallelujah Money. We will talk about that song probably a bit later. But Saturn's Bars, I think if you take it out... I mean, if the auto-tune rubs you the wrong way, Kush, I completely understand. For a lot of people, it's such a turn-off in any song, no matter how it's utilised. Auto-tune will just rub people the wrong way. And I understand why, and that's absolutely fine. I mean, but what I liked about this track was Popcorn hasn't really done anything like this before. Popcorn is the artist who's featured and is so heavily lathered with auto-tune throughout most of the track. I really enjoyed his performance. I mean, it's a little unreadable because it's not exactly straight English, but I I find myself quite drawn to the sort of dark, gloomy instrumental here, and the sort of... That's the thing about this album. The production quality is top-notch throughout the whole thing, I think. But
I'd agree with that, yeah.
it's more the flow and the structure of how some songs, and even the album as a whole, operates that really sort of falters for me.
I can pinpoint where this album goes wrong compared to the other albums, at least for me. For the most part, most of the other albums that I enjoyed by Gorillaz have always been more upbeat, more lively, more dancey sort of production and songs. This one had a lot of darker and drearier and more... even like the one song, Busted and Blue, was straight up like a ballad. It wasn't even like anything they've done before. So I think that's where the album falters for me. It's a bit too dark and dreary for like a Gorillaz style music. But
I can definitely agree with that. I was expecting something a lot more peppy after hearing the singles. I mean, I know Saturn's Bars is kind of a more of a downtrodden piece, but the other singles that dropped, excluding Hallelujah Money, were really upbeat, really up-tempo, and this is not a case of my expectations sort of hurting my experience by any means. I can promise you that, but I was at least hoping that they would go in a direction where they would have a more mellow, upbeat record on the whole, but I think past the second half, past the track Andromeda, it's pretty much all sort of miserable until We Got the Power, which is a track that's been getting some very divisive reactions. I personally like it a fair bit. It's not something that I'll always be in the mood to listen to, but I think the production is pretty fantastic. Jenny Beth's feature is pretty good, quite unlike what she'd do in Savages. But it really is the flow and the structure and the mood and the overall sort of feel of the album that I am really struggling to get into. When it actually comes to track by track ratings, I actually quite like a fair few of these songs, and that's why I can't consider it a bad album. But it does feel fractured in the same way that, say, a mixtape would. I don't know if you guys would agree with that.
Yeah, pretty much. Just going back to Saturn's Bars, I thought that was a really great case for how dancehall can be done right when it's a little more authentic and less pandering to Western audiences, even if it is to the point of unintelligibility. And Popcan is a great presence, and I do not mind his auto-tune. And I liked him on the song I Know There's Gonna Be Good Times, which was a Jamie XX track that dropped 2 years ago. So, and Damon's part here is actually reasonably catchy too, but I think that is overlapped by Popcan's part quite a lot. Like, when I think of this song, I just remember his part. Just to say, on the whole, I think the whole lack of cohesion on this album definitely benefits like some of these songs that sound nothing alike. Like, this song doesn't really work with any others, but the fact that there's very little cohesion and there's like these very superfluous interludes laced around to try and connect them together, it does feel more like a mixtape. I'd have to agree there, Ed.
I mean, it's so scattered, and I feel like having these little interludes, which are all voiced by Ben Mendelsohn, who recently appeared as the villain in the Rogue One Star Wars film, for a point of reference of like how high profile this dude is. It feels like they were intentionally placed in here to try and make it more cohesive, but really for me they do very little to remedy things. And you could argue that Gorillaz' debut was equally fractured. And you'd be absolutely right, but the reason Gorillaz' debut worked was because it had Damon tying together practically every track on the album. Here, Damon's presence is not felt, like, at all. And as a long-time fan of the band, when I hear these songs, when I do hear Damon singing, I do not picture 2D, I do not picture the cartoon band performing this. And this is kind of a weird point to make, but I think it's one that's very valid in criticising this album. is
I
it
agree
feels
completely
kind of
with
far.
that.
It feels kind of far removed from what Gorillaz was, even on their most out there projects like Plastic Beach. I still felt this connection to the band. Maybe it's because I've grown out of it. Maybe not, but it
But I
is
don't know
kind of a
if
weird complaint, but I think it's a very valid one.
about being grown out of it. I still enjoy some of their older work. Like I still go back to
Well,
Clint
of course.
Eastwood on a weekly basis and listen to that song, and I don't. I still have that. I still feel like this is Gorillaz. This is this animated band that makes music. This one just felt like. This one felt almost like a collaboration effort by all these different featured artists, and it didn't really. It didn't. You could have released this without the Gorillaz title, and I wouldn't have been able to tell. It was almost to
Well,
that extent sometimes.
Yeah, a lot of the
I
time.
don't
At
know. I
some
would have.
points.
Yeah, I would have recognised Damon on the majority
No,
a
no,
little
yeah.
bit to at least think he was producing it, which he obviously did. But I get what you mean. It's like not as prevalent that this is a Gorillaz project to everyone, or
I
like
mean,
if we didn't know.
I think it's very intentional, but because the title Humans, the artwork we have here of the cartoon characters almost like transfigured into sort of human form in a way. A friend of mine wrote a really, really enlightening review that sort of brought to attention some ideas that I hadn't really thought about, which was, I mean, this record is quite political in nature, but not overtly. When Damon brought in the guests to his studio to record for this thing, he told them to think about this huge event that would impact the world in a sort of unprecedented way, and think about how people would feel the morning after that event would take place. And a point of reference for a lot of the artists was Trump's inauguration, which was, when they were recording this, almost like a fantasy, like something that would never happen, and then it just happens to have become reality. I think that's a really interesting angle to take. The problem is that these guests almost seem so focused on covering this topic that it just becomes far removed from this fantasy that Gorillaz essentially is, that it's these cartoon characters creating a series of different genres blended together in, Gorillaz has never had a set genre. That's not what the problem is here. The problem here is it feels far removed from what Gorillaz even was in the first place. It feels like a Damon Albarn vehicle to do essentially whatever he wants. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But then you can't then slap the Gorillaz title on the disc and have people expect it to be a certain thing and deliver what is essentially just a Damon Albarn vehicle. I mean, again, I may have grown out of really picturing it as anything other than that, but it's really hard to say for me at this time. No matter how much I listen to Humans, that's just how I feel.
Yeah. A song that I think is probably one of the songs that you think are like is a good idea but didn't work so well, and one you might not have liked, Kush, was She's My Caller, which was one of my favourites. What did you two think of that one?
Yeah, that one I wasn't really a big fan of either.
I mean, the Kaliuchis feature is pretty cool on that track. The instrumental is decent, but this brings back my problems with Damon on this album. His lack of vocal presence is a problem, but then when he does turn up on a track and does take the reins, the results are really hit or miss. Yeah, on She's My Caller, I don't really like Damon's performance at all. I mean, I like Kaliuchis on this track, I like the production, I like the instrumental, but it's Damon who really holds it back for me, which I'm surprised I'm even saying something like that, but it's true. The problem on this album is not too many guests. Plastic Beach had a ton of guests, and it still felt like
millions.
a Gorillaz album.
Yeah,
it still felt cohesive. It still worked
True.
as a thematic project. Here, everything is so fractured. Everything is all over the place. And there's so little Damon to sort of tie it all together and keep it cohesive, at least as having him as a through line. Other tracks here, like Charger, I really like his performance. But then there's tracks like Strobe Light with Pevan Everett, which I like so much, but wish Damon sung on it, at least for a small portion of it. His absence on this album really is an Achilles heel for me. But then when he does turn up, it's hard to say whether he'll even sound all that great anyway. So who knows? Like, what? It's hard to think of a good fix for that even.
So what do you guys think about like, I guess the more rap based? I want to say like he had quite a few rap artists. I want to say the one that I liked least was the De La Soul song, and I like De La Soul. I love De La Soul, but I didn't enjoy them on the song for some reason.
The song Moments.
Yes.
I actually have quite a few notes on that track because it's one of the tracks I'm most conflicted on. I love almost everything about it, I've got to say, Kush, but the De La Soul feature rubs me the wrong way a little. Because there's a lot of moments on this album that are really overtly sexual. I'm not entirely sure how it serves the theme of the album, but it just happens to be the case. Another example is the track Ascension with Vince Staples, which I actually think is the best track on the album. Ascension is a fantastic opener. The production sounds amazing. Vince Staples has a surprisingly good feature. And the overt sexual nature of the hook on that track does not bother me at all. I actually think it's quite ingenious. Like, in this time of sort of almost like this apocalyptic scenario, it's like, drop that ass, you know? Like, get down, but still he's using these sexual terms to sort of put that message across. It's quite strange. Whereas on the De La Soul track, which you mentioned, I mean, is it really fair to say it features De La Soul? I mean, we only have a Posdnuos contribution here. And he's my favourite member of De La Soul. Yeah, and his verse is so sexually fueled, but he uses such strange language. Like, I don't really want to go into detail because it just makes me feel filthy. But the hook on this track is great, on Moments. Great hook. And the production is fantastic, and the flow of the track is really interesting to me as well. But again, like, there's tracks here where there's one big thing holding it back, and for me here, it's Posdnuos' verse on this track.
I thought it fell apart more so in the second half of the song when they had so many things going on, and normally I enjoy like the more experimental, more loud production that Gorillaz does have, but it had so many things going on, and there was this like, I don't know who the female vocalist, but there's a female vocalist in the backing, and it just, or some sort of sample, and it just was so off-putting towards the second half. And I agree, De La Soul's feature was not as impressive as I thought it, because I really enjoy De La Soul's music. It just was not for me in this album.
And for Gorillaz, the track Feel Good Inc., which is probably their most celebrated track, if not Clint Eastwood, has a De La Soul feature, which is really fantastic and memorable. And also the track Superfast Jellyfish had De La Soul featured as well, and that was a great track as well.
That's one of the highlights off of Plastic Beach. I just want to quickly talk about my two favourites. Two others. Let Me Out it's weird. It's just because it's got Mavis Staples. Like, Pusha T is good on this song. This is another rap one, kind of. But, it is, because Damon even raps on this song. But
essentially, yeah.
But Mavis, for some reason, she sounds so powerful and urgent and overwhelming in a good way that... all of this, like you said, Ed, that he brought people into the studio. I don't know if this is true, but for some reason I thought Mavis's part felt like recorded separately, like apart from them. Like, she was asked to do it and she like complied, but she brought it in. I don't know, it felt like they built the song around her feature. I don't know if that's true. Do you know?
I'm not entirely sure, but I think you could be right. I think Mavis Staples absolutely murders that track. She's one of the better features on the album. And I actually like Pusha T's feature as well. I think it's a pretty memorable set of verses, and Damon's contributions are pretty good as well. That is one of the better tracks on the album, I think.
And then there's Hallelujah Money, which it's an odd one, because obviously this dropped like 4 months ago now, and it's aged really well for me, like in a way that I would think a song would need like a few years to, because I think you'll remember, Ed, when this came out, it was like a music video, very weirdly. A lot of backlash because of unintentional political feeling. But aside from that, just the fact that it like went down and there was no official release for it. Like, I'm sure you can remember me asking you at least like 5 times, "Oh, when's this coming out?" Like, just the anticipation for this song to get released kind of heightened the fact that I loved it so much on here. And also, like, Sex Murder Party, like, that whole section, I know we could get into that in a minute, but I didn't love that section. But just the whole, like, this feels weirdly detached from the rest of the album because it was released so early, and it's like a breath of fresh air almost, because Benjamin Clementine is such a damn unique and personality-filled way of singing, and I love his voice. And the chorus is really lovely and life-affirming and sung in a really nice way. I don't know exactly what to make of the... Yeah. I don't know exactly what to make of the line, the chemtrails line. I think that was more tongue-in-cheek than anything else, but I don't know.
It's certainly a political track. It's certainly a political track.
It is.
But not overtly. As I said, they sort of took Trump's inauguration as a sort of reference point and not a direct thing to make these songs about. Hallelujah Money is the most overtly political track on the album, yes. But ironically, for me, it's also the one that feels the most like Gorillaz. I have think
seen people say that.
In that sense, it does feel kind of detached from the rest of the album, but it's also one of the very best tracks on the record for me. I mean, I know this track had a huge backlash, but from first listen, I pretty much loved it. And you could say that's the sort of fanboy inside me speaking, but that's not how my brain works, honestly. I don't think of things in those terms. If a band I love releases a bad song, I'll think it's a bad song. But here, I loved Hallelujah Money. I love Benjamin Clementine's feature. I love Damon's vocals on this track. The progression of the track is really unique and strange. The production sounds amazing.
His spoken word part is really unique.
I think I've been pretty negative in this review so far. I must stress, I don't think this is a bad album at all. I just have so many problems with it. And they don't mar it to the point where I'm put off listening to it. I've been listening to this album a fair bit, but I know for a fact it's not going to stay with me in the same way Demon Days and Plastic Beach, and even their debut, which was equally if not more fractured, have done over the years. But Hallelujah Money is an amazing track. I really, really dig it. I'm still can't quite understand why people hated that song so much.
Well, I can try to explain why I did not enjoy the song as much.
Oh damn! Here we go.
I like the production of the song is fine, but for me personally, not even like the political aspect. I just couldn't get into his vocals, which I guess is not a Gorillaz problem. That's just a Benjamin Clementine problem. And it's my first introduction to Benjamin Clementine, so I just was not feeling his vocals at all in this song. But the production was really nice with the more droney and ambient-esque intro. But I think my biggest problem with this record in general is that there is no set tone, and it's so fragmented and it's so all over the place. Then there's like I was listening to this with my friend, and she's saying the first song is Ascension. That's like a party banger, and then the next song is more like almost soul funk-esque song. It just didn't have a set tone, so like you put this on, you don't know what you're gonna expect, which is okay, but it's also kind of bad when you go into an album and then you just can't figure out what kind of tone it's going for.
I mean, Plastic Beach essentially did the same thing, but Plastic Beach was really focused on a theme. Here, it's kind of just like this loose idea that every track follows of being this reaction to the inauguration or some similar dramatic event, whether political or not. And it's not enough to tie it all together. It's not enough to make you feel like there's a progression between the songs. I agree. I mean, like I said, Ascension, fantastic song, brilliant opener. But when it doesn't transition into Strobe Light at all. It just sort of ends and then Strobe Light begins. And that's not going to be as big a problem for a lot of people who sort of engage in shuffle culture. But for me, I'm an album person. I want albums to have a progression and a through line. And like I said, the interludes here do very little to remedy things for me.
I will say I am a shuffle culture guy. Just leave that there. Just when I'm out and about.
I mean, I'm not.
Just out and about, I
I'm not
find that
against
easier.
that mentality. I'm not against that mentality, but my favorite thing about listening to music is taking an album, sitting down, listening to the whole thing front to back, and taking it as a singular experience, even though we're going through several songs. Here, the mixtape type approach really just rubs me the wrong way, especially considering it's a Gorillaz record, and Gorillaz records in the past have been so informed by a narrative. Even Demon Days, which covered a lot of different genres and moods, still had a narrative. And here, that narrative is just so far removed from anything that no matter how many songs I enjoy on this record, it's sort of compelling me to listen to them in isolation. Like tracks like the Danny Brown and Kalela track, I think is actually a really good song. Doesn't fit into the album for me.
Nope, not at all.
And also, I do like that song a lot, but can I just say, most underwhelming Danny Brown performance in
I was
ages.
just about to.
In
just
so
about to say
long.
that.
I'm so disappointed because after the last Avalanches record, and the Avalanches are quite similar to Gorillaz in a sense, I was really looking forward to Danny Brown's performance on this thing, and I was so let down. It's just an average Danny Brown performance. There's nothing special about it at all.
I mean, the only thing that song proved was that he has the versatility to rap over literally anything at this point.
As if tracks like Ain't It Funny haven't already proven that.
Yeah, but I felt I was very underwhelmed by what his flow was very basic. His lyricism wasn't that impressive. I mean, obviously this is miles ahead of most other rap features in music today, but still wasn't that good.
But by Danny Brown standards, it's just there's nothing to be impressed by here.
Yeah.
I think Kalela actually outshines him to a great degree. I really love her feature. But again, this is another track where Damon, at least vocally, is nowhere to be found. And it's hard to even imagine him fitting onto the track. And of course, there's been Gorillaz songs on past albums where Damon is nowhere to be found. But it's the balance here that's just completely off. And it's such a big flaw in the record. Like, no matter how good I like that song, Submission, it still fits into this big problem I have with the record.
Yeah.
Well, Alex, what would you rate this album?
Okay, I liked all of the songs up until Charger. I don't like that one too much, but I still think it had some really decent aspects. Like, I like the glitchy sounding chords. Loved everything again apart from Carnival and Sex Murder Party. So that's only 3 songs from the main album I don't like. And then, like, some of the bonus material, even though we're not going to really touch on that, is pretty good, but it's still not that great. I love a load of this. Like, we haven't even spoken about how great Andromeda is.
Oh,
but,
God, that track is great, yeah.
But yes, a 7. I thought the lack of cohesion didn't bother me. I thought, especially, I'm thinking about this playing these separately. These are going to sound great. Like, you two keep saying, like, it doesn't fit into the album. There's no album for this, anything to fit into. There's, like, there's no set base for anything to fit into, so that's never a criticism for me. Like, it's not as if the first 3 songs set anything apart. One's like hip hop, one's dancehall, one's funk, basically. So essentially, I just view these as some really solid tracks I really like. I mean, no, it's not got any really favorite Gorillaz songs, like top 20, maybe not. Well, maybe 1 or 2, but yeah, I'd say 7. This
not
is
even
really
Ascension.
Here's the thing, I like that as a Vince Staples type of song, but I don't know, I wouldn't say it's one of my favourites by them. I didn't like it as much as you two did, but I did really still like it.
But that's highlighting the problem with this album. You just said you like that as a Vince Staples song. That's
I guess,
how
but, yeah.
so many of the songs on here are like that. It's like, oh yeah, it's a really good song.
Yeah,
but it's not
I don't know.
Gorillaz.
Well, I don't like Vince Staples that much, but I don't know. I've not gone into summertime, whatever that was.
I'm not a Vince Staples fan at all. I've got to say that right now, and that's kind of why I was so surprised by that track.
I just thought it
But
was generally good. Like Hell Can Wait is an EP I've tried by him, and that is about the same quality level. But yeah, a 7. I thought this was a really solid album. Not too much worse than the debut for me, but
Fair
the
enough.
debut was probably easier to listen to. So pretty positive review from me, I'd say.
What would you give it, Ed?
I would give this album a 6 out of 10. And let me explain myself. It's a good album. On its own merits, it's a good album. It's a solid album. Alex, I don't think I don't like it quite as much as you from what we've said. But I do still like this album a lot. I've been listening to it quite a few times since it came out. But as a Gorillaz project, like I said, I can't help but feel disappointed. There are plenty of songs on here I like. Love Ascension, Strobe Light, good song. Saturn's Bars, good song. Moments, we went over that. I've got problems with it, but overall it's kind of a thrill ride from beginning to end for me, no matter how messy it is. Submission is good. Charger, I was kind of torn on. Andromeda, really good song. Busted and Blue is pretty good. Not quite as sort of enamored about that track as many others seem to be. I think the only outright bad song on the standard track listing is the song Carnival with Anthony Hamilton.
Yeah, that song's not that good. No.
Really forgettable track. Very few things about that track really shout out quality to me. Let Me Out, good track. And then Sex Murder Party and She's My Collar are just sort of okay for me. I think Sex Murder Party has a really good refrain from Damon on it, but it doesn't really do much else for me.
Yeah.
And then Hallelujah Money and We've Got the Power really don't work as an end to the album for me. Like, it's such a weird change of pace that it just doesn't work in that context. But in isolation, both good songs, in my opinion. So I like the vast majority of the songs here, and it's a good album. But I think from everything we've said, it's pretty obvious that they can't just put out a good album to really satisfy what I personally, as a fan of Gorillaz, want from this project. Because it's such a unique project in music history. I mean, it is essentially a Damon Albarn vehicle. And as a Damon Albarn project, this album really delivers a lot more so than his solo album from a few years back. But overall, I just feel so iffy on it. And if I'm going to be revisiting any of these tracks in the future, it's going to be in isolation, in playlists, in mixtapes. It's not going to be throughout the whole album. So yeah, 6 out of 10, pretty light 6 out of 10. Solid project. I recommend you check it out if you've not heard it already. There will be a number of takeaways from this album for you, I guarantee it, because it is so fractured and it covers so many different genres that for someone to listen to this and not enjoy any of it, that would absolutely shock me. But yeah, I'm a little disappointed. I'm sorry to say, but it's just a fairly good album.
So I did not like it nearly as much as you guys did. For me, this felt more like a collab album with all the featured artists rather than a Gorillaz album, for the most part. And I think Alex highlighted that point where he said it felt like a good Vince Staples song rather than the good Gorillaz songs on the Ascension. I just felt maybe because I'm a huge fan of their earlier work that I just couldn't get into some of their later, like some of this stuff. It just didn't feel like Gorillaz at this point. It just felt like a solo album, like as you've said multiple times, Ed. That being said, there are quite a few songs I like: Ascension, Submission, Andromeda, Let Me Out. There's quite a few songs I do like. It's just that given this album is like 20 something songs, and I only pulled out 5 or 6. The rest were kind of forgettable and or just kind of outright bad. Like, I didn't like Saturn's Bars at all, so I'm not sure. Maybe it's just because I have to listen to it a few more times. 'Cause I've already listened to it 3 times so far, I want to say.
I've listened to this album like 7 times now. I'm pretty firm on how I feel about it, I've got to say.
Yeah, I've listened to about 3 as well, Kush.
So, I don't know. I felt like there are good aspects, but there are just a lot of bad that outweighs it. So for me, it's a 5 out of 10.
Damn.
That's
Fucking
okay.
Shots fired.
It's not even that different. Well, I don't know. I suppose. Well, yeah.
Well, if that's it, and thanks for tuning to Busted Speakers. We hope you enjoyed this video. Tell us what you think about this album in the comments below. Check out some of our other videos and check us out on social media.